Sure.
Hello, everyone. Hello, and welcome to Alta Live. My name is Beth Spotswood. I'm Alta's digital editor, and I am so excited to welcome you to today's conversation with author Nick Hornby. He's here today with our editorial director, Blaise Zerega, to discuss his new book. It's a collection of his Believer columns from the magazine's time in Las Vegas. It's called Rosamond Lehmann in Vegas. A bit about Nick, if you don't already know, which I'm guessing most of you have. Nick Hornby is an Oscar-nominated screenwriter and award-winning author. He's written 8 novels, including Just Like You, Funny Girl, Juliet Naked, A Long Way Down, Slam, How to Be Good, About a Boy, and High Fidelity. He's written numerous nonfiction books, as well as his collection of columns in Believer magazine. He's received the E.M. Forster Award from the American Academy of Arts and Letters, and he co-founded the children's writing charity Ministry of Stories in East London. Today, he's going to be in convo with Blaise about his new book. And before I turn it over to the two of them, I'm going to give you a brief sales pitch for the wonders of Alta Journal. We are an award-winning quarterly magazine focused on California and the West. If you read the Q&A Nick did in Alta, he's always wanted to be a Californian writer. So if you too love California literature, Alta Journal is the quarterly mag for you. We've got weekly free events like this, Alta Live, as well as our monthly California Book Club. You can become a member for $50 a year, get 4 gorgeous issues, a special gift, and free access to our website. It is great to see where everyone is zooming in today. Please let us know in the chat where you're zooming in from. This interview will be recorded and posted to altaonline.com later this afternoon. We will also send you an email with links to where you can buy Nick's book, where you can read his Q&A with Blaise, where you can read his Substack. He published a new Substack this morning on, I think you can guess what it's about. And all of that good stuff. There's a Q&A button at the bottom of the screen to ask questions of our guests. I'm going to get lost and pop back at the end to ask any questions on your behalf. Hello, Atlanta, Georgia, Santa Rosa, Sacramento, Krakow, Poland. Everyone have a great time. I'm turning this over to Blaise.
Oh, I think we're on. Hi, hello, everyone. Thank you, Beth. And hello, Nick.
Hi.
Delighted to be here with you, and delighted to everyone chiming in from all over the place. Today we're going to talk about Rosamond Lehmann in Vegas by Nick Hornby, a collection of his columns. It's about 1.5 years worth of columns written during the time the Believer was wandering the proverbial desert. There's so much good stuff in here, and we're going to touch upon a lot of things and welcome all kinds of questions. Beth will be grabbing them and asking them towards the end. So please use the Q&A button to submit your questions, and we'll get them asked. And I got to just clear the room. There's an elephant here, staring at us right now, and that is the morning after a presidential election. You've come all the way from England, and you're calling in today from Venice, California. And I understand you wrote a Substack this morning, sort of about some of your thoughts on what happened last night. And let's just clear the air and hear your thoughts, please, on the election, and perhaps summarize your Substack and maybe tell people where they can sign up for it too.
Well, I, like probably a lot of your readers and viewers, was hoping for a different result. Very much hoping for a different result. It affects us in England profoundly, of course, and it affects Europe profoundly. So it's not like we feel like we're poking our nose into other people's affairs. Your affairs are our affairs. But what I was writing about in Substack today was my relationship with America since I was a kid, and how much America has always meant to me. Especially if you're kind of alienated by some of the stuff that goes on in England in terms of the high and low culture, the snobbery, the class system, that America always seemed like this democratic ideal, not just politically, but in terms of its culture and its the way it seemed to kind of welcome everyone in, and the demotic of America that made so much sense to generation after generation of English people. So, but in the Substack, I said, there's always been a wildness about America too, a kind of savagery, which is part of the myth, and an important part of the myth. And I think this election kind of rather proves that point. You know, it was a pretty wild thing to have done. I say that not with any approval, but it's extreme. He's an extreme man, and you know what's happened is part of what's always happened in America, I think. But I don't know whether this one's a step too far. We'll see.
Right. Well, I mean, and again, I want to get to this book, so I'm going to try to segue, which is, so in here, this was during a time of Brexit, and you know, so you do comment, you know, not just on books and of course music. There's all kinds of music in here for your fans and music lovers, but also on you know, current events. And so, do you imagine? I mean, I'll just ask, without tipping your hand, will you be covering, mentioning the transition to Trump's administration and so forth in some of your upcoming columns for The Believer?
It's funny, as you guys know, I mean, The Believer comes out 4 times a year now. And I wrote a column not long ago. So in a couple of months' time, when I have to write the next one, maybe it'll come up. But you know, I wrote about Brexit in that book because I read a book about Brexit, and it's always the starting point for those columns is what I've been reading. But I read a book by someone who was working for the Remain campaign in 2016 and what went wrong, and so that enables me to have my own say as well.
Right. Well, let's get into that then. You know, speaking of wild savages or something.
Yeah.
You know, the polysyllabic spree, the 84 young women who run The Believer, as you so brilliantly put it. How did you first get connected? I mean, you've been doing this column for 20 years.
Yeah.
And we're huge fans of The Believer. I think a lot of people in California and across the US are as well, certainly. But how did you get connected with them?
Well, I met Dave and Vendela, I guess around about the time that Dave's heartbreaking work of Staggering Genius came out. I met them in New York, and the next time I went on book tour, they showed me around McSweeney's, and I was kind of blown away by the creative energy that goes on there. Everything they do, you know, the tuition, the writing, the art, and they just, I think, printed the first edition of the magazine of The Believer, and I was being shown that, and I thought, oh, I'd so love to write for that, but I'm not going to say anything. I'm just going to see if they ask, and they didn't.
Well, that's a very, very British of you or something not to ask for it.
Yeah. It never occurs to me that anyone wants them in their magazine. Anyway, when I got home, I think Vendela emailed and said, would you ever be interested in writing for that magazine we showed you? And funnily enough, I just stopped writing for The New Yorker because their editing process, I just thought life is too short. You know, I was writing music reviews, but it took weeks, and it was pretty much pre-internet. I was holding up my phone to the speaker so that they could fact check lyrics, and I was doing that at 11 o'clock at night because of the time difference. And I thought, there's an easier way of earning a living than this. So the Believer came to me at a time when I just stopped that, and it was kind of so loose and fun compared to writing for The New Yorker, which is so scary and you're under the microscope every single word you write. It just seemed like a joy. And I suggested the idea of just writing about what I'd read. You know, I wasn't being paid to review any of these books. I would just go from one book to the other, and that would be my reading journey described in the magazine. And some months I didn't read anything because it was like a World Cup or something. So then I'd write about reading nothing. And it's, I don't know, I kind of developed a voice for it, but this sort of crabby old guy voice for the Believer's young readers. And it's been, I hope, beneficial to both of us, but I really love it. And I did stop it for a while, but I missed it too much. I went back to it.
Yeah, and you know, I think it's a hit, and you've got legions of fans. And yeah, we need to ask the next question, which I know I asked this in the Q&A for Alta, but tell us about the title. You know, who is she, and what's she doing in Vegas?
Well, Rosamond Lehmann is a great English novelist of the 30s, 40s, a kind of Bloomsbury-ish author, really brilliant, underrated writer. And well, I read a whole bunch of her books soon after the Believer had gone to Vegas. And partly it was one of those reading journey months where I'd never read her before. And there were various reasons why I ended up reading 3 by her and a biography. So she more or less got her own column, but it seemed to be very much in the spirit of how I'd started the column, which was one thing leading to another. And she's not someone who would ever have been near Vegas in a billion years. So the juxtaposition felt quite good.
It might well be Virginia Woolf in Vegas.
Yeah, exactly.
And you know, your names, I'm laughing a little bit because it's as if you're talking about organized crime figures, right? You got the editor, the initial crew of editors of the polysyllabic spree. Then you got the Black Mountain Mob.
Yeah, so the Believer sold the magazine at that time to this very nice institute in Las Vegas, but I thought, I can't go on with the polysyllabic spree. It's the vibe has changed from San Francisco to Vegas, and so yeah, now I'm writing for a whole different bunch of people.
So have you given is there a new name for the editorial team?
Well, now it's back. Really, they're back in San Francisco. So I guess we're back with the spree. Okay. I don't know if there are as many of them now. It's quarterly.
Mm-hmm. No longer 84 in Chile.
Yeah, maybe not 84 anymore. Yeah, down to 30 or 40.
But still ecstatic, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. And in, you know, and in these columns, your tastes run from Lonesome Dove by Larry McMurtry. Some books, some are new, some are old. Fiction, nonfiction. Susan Orlean, the library book. Making Oscar Wilde by Mikhail Mendelssohn.
Yeah.
Which is fascinating. And again, true Nick Hornby fashion, I recommend this column. He works in references to the Allman Brothers and George Michael. All about the 1882 tour of Oscar Wilde's lecture tour of the U.S. As well as in the final column is a great book, which now you may want to go out and read it, called Cary Grant, A Brilliant Disguise.
Yeah.
It's, that Grant is actually a British kid named Archie Leach.
Yeah, absolutely, from Bristol. Yeah.
That love affair with Sophia Loren.
Yeah. I love that story about Sophia Loren, which I will repeat, which is that basically he'd asked her to, he bullied a producer to employ her because he was in love with her. Then they got together and split up. And so when he turned up on set and she was there, because he'd bullied them into employing her, he threw a hissy fit because he didn't want her there anymore. But then when he started working with her, he fell in love with her all over again.
And they're both married, and he just proposed.
Exactly. Yeah, different times.
It's fantastic. But how do you decide which books to buy and which books to read? What's your selection process?
Well, I don't know. I think if you listen to your body, your body tells you what you need in the same way that you know whether to drink more water or to stop eating junk food for a few days. I think our relationship with books is like that. That sometimes we're in a good enough place that where we can read something deep and serious, and sometimes the world is distracting you and you want something that's not like that at all. I know that people's reading habits changed a lot in the pandemic. Some people couldn't read, some people could only read Agatha Christie, some people wanted to understand the world better. So it affected all of us in lots of ways, but in our reading habits, I think especially. And I've found that throughout my life, and I discover an author like Rosamond Lehmann, or I go back to an old author, or what I've stopped doing so much, I think, is reading reviews and buying books as a result of reviews. They seem to me to be the ones that remain unread in my reading.
Oh, I was going to ask, because I'm going to hold this up so
Yeah.
everyone can see that there's a section where he says which books he read and then which book were purchased this month.
Yeah.
That's a lot of books. Is there a local bookstore?
Well, there's the local bookstore. I think,
keeping in business here.
I think one of the problems with sitting at a computer all day is that when I get distracted and start reading, you know, maybe Substack or maybe a magazine, and I end up reading something that leads me somewhere, and you know, and I click it and buy it, and so there's that aspect of buying, which is the sort of online impulse. There's the browsing aspect of buying as well, where I just go somewhere and think, well, I never knew about that book, but I'm gonna buy it, and also I just go back to my own shelves a lot, because lots of things that I bought that eventually got shelved unread, then I find them again and suddenly they seem like a good idea again. But I don't know if you have the same process, which is going on the nightstand and the nightstand getting taller, and then you look at the bottom half of that pile and you think, what the hell was I thinking? That's going on the shelf.
and then on top of the shelf, because there's no more room on the shelf.
Exactly. Yeah. And you can never find them again because your original filing system has long since disappeared.
And what do you think? I mean, so what's been your path to becoming a critic, a cultural critic? You know, how did you end up? I mean, you're a novelist, a screenwriter. We can talk about your screenwriting, but you know, just sort of how did you find yourself in? You know, is there a path that you took consciously to become a columnist or a critic?
No, absolutely not. I started reviewing books way back when in England because a literary magazine bought a short story from me. That was the first thing I ever sold. And then
what story and what magazine?
It was the Literary Review, which pays you £25, I think, still, for a piece. Anyway, I sold them this story and it didn't appear. And then they phoned up and said, we're not doing stories anymore. So the first story I sold it didn't appear anywhere. But they said, would you do a review instead? And I thought, okay. And I kind of had some fun with it, and they asked me to do another one. And then that kind of went out from there, really. I mean, when I started writing in the 90s, there was a whole ton of freelance work available. There were all these new magazines. There were new rock magazines. There were new men's magazines. The advertising, they all had advertising coming out of their ears. They had money. And you could earn, I mean, you couldn't keep a family with it, but you could definitely earn enough to pay your rent and your food from freelancing. And that's disappeared completely. I know from young writers that they're being offered less for a piece in a magazine than I was in 1995. You know, that money has just completely gone. But it gave me a taste for it, and it wasn't anything I was afraid of any longer. I thought, no, I can do that. And so everything, the fiction and the screenplays and so on, came after the cultural criticism.
And so any advice to a young critic, a young writer, someone who wants to?
Well, I have to say that economic model of Substack is really interesting. That people are making money on Substack just because they're excellent, not because they're famous or they have any pre-existing audience. And it's a good place to practice writing as well. I mean, if you've got not many subscribers, then you've got the freedom to do what you want, and maybe you'll develop an audience. But I think those platforms like that are going to be the future for a little while.
Speaking of writing and trying to make a living or pursuing one's creativity, so you've done novels, short stories, criticism, and famously too, screenplays. The screenplay for High Fidelity, Brooklyn.
Yeah, Brooklyn.
Colm Tobin's book. And so I could ask, have you been asked to write the screenplay for Long Island, the sequel? You heard it here first, folks, here on Alta Live.
I was approached and I said no before I'd read the book, because I didn't want to go back, as it were. For me, the movie of Brooklyn was such a happy experience, and I was so pleased with the end result and the performances and working with those people. And I thought the chances of it being as good an experience probably were I think you get long odds on having a repeat experience like that. That's not to say that a completely different set of people wouldn't have an amazing experience. So I thought it was better to let other people do it.
Are you doing another screenplay for somebody else or another one?
I have. I mean, it's been my main job the last couple of years, and it's a hard time to get things made. But yeah, I'm in the middle of a couple of things at the moment. One of them is Susan Orlean's book about Rin Tin Tin, which
one of your columns.
yeah, which I hadn't been asked to do. I just read that, and then someone approached me, and I thought, whoa, I love that book so much. So I'm having a go at that. And then there's another one I'm in the middle of that I don't think I'm allowed to talk about at the moment. It's a biopic of a very famous living person.
We're among friends here. You know. All right, I know we're getting, so yeah, the clock is ticking, and I still wanted to talk to you a little bit about music.
Yeah.
So you've written about music for the New Yorker, and I don't think I'm overstating to say you're a big fan of the Replacements.
A big fan of the Replacements.
And,
yeah. And that book was, I just thought, incredible. Bob Mayer's book.
Yeah, so you've got Replacements in here, the Go-Betweens, and I gotta ask, I couldn't tell, readers always find something in authors' works that the author may or may not have put there. And they think it's a message from Nick to me. It's just for me. But in that
well, it was, okay.
Okay, I'm gonna reveal myself as a super fan of the Smiths.
Oh, right.
On page 50,
yes,
there's a line that says, "And yet, stop me if you've heard this before." And all I get here is the, "Stop me, oh, please stop me." As well as even Claire Dederer, who writes a brilliant introduction. She picks up this thing at the end. I couldn't tell she was winking at you. The last sentence of her intro, she says that, you're like a light that will never go out, which is, again, another Smith song. So is there something going on here? Are there Easter eggs here for musical fans of all stripes?
Well, let's say yes.
All right.
I mean, I'm not going to sell fewer books, am I? If I say yes, I'll get everyone going. So, no, there is a personal message for anyone who is thinking of buying these books.
Exactly. Yes. And speaking of that, Claire also writes that she imagines. So a lot of these, I think all these columns actually were written during the pandemic. And she talks about how important they were to her and what a gift these are to readers everywhere. And says that she imagines that you writing these columns also make you happy. And lots of times writers will say, "Oh, I'm writing so hard, I hate it," and yet they're still writers, right? But you know, how do you feel? Do these bring you joy? Is this something that you look
Yeah, honestly, if it didn't bring me joy, I wouldn't have stuck at it for 20 years. It's one of the most fun things I do for really fun and supportive people, and I think I've done good writing in parts of those 20 years. I mean, you know, some are better than others, but I feel really comfortable with the voice and what I'm doing. And, you know, one of the things about being asked to review a book is that sometimes you realize halfway through you're the wrong person to be doing it, but you've taken the gig anyway. So you can't let anyone down. And I can feel myself when I'm doing those paid gigs, forcing myself a little bit, but coming at it the other way, starting with books that you've really loved reading and then wanting to talk about them. It's such a joy and a gift to be able to do that.
Yeah, well, it's a gift as a reader to do this, and I think we're at the hour to invite Beth back on. I know there's lots of questions from the audience here, and
Hello, Beth.
It's
Hi.
it's infectious, and I highly, you know, please go out and support The Believer, McSweeney's, Nick Hornby. You know, get thee to a bookstore.
Well, especially The Believer. Support The Believer. Yeah.
Yes.
Proud Believer subscriber. I have an update for you, Nick, that the score is Inter Milan 1, Arsenal's 0, I believe we say, and it is currently halftime. Folks, if you have read Fever Pitch, you will know that Nick is a diehard Arsenal supporter, and we are at halftime. They're playing right now. I'm sorry to be the bearer of more bad news today.
Honestly, Beth, you seemed so nice when we first met.
I'm sorry, I felt a responsibility.
Half an hour ago, but now.
I felt a responsibility to update you, just so you would know and not be.
The world is about lies. Just tell me lies and I will vote for you.
I'm sorry. We're still trying to keep it honest here at Alta Live. The truth hurts sometimes. They're going to come back. It's halftime. They're getting screamed at.
I've got a whole half to go.
Yeah. All right. I have another question about music, actually. Do you listen to music when you write? And if so, what do you listen to?
No, I wish I could, and I've tried, but it just kind of gets in the way of my head a bit. If the things that have worked best are kind of ambient-y things and repetitive, and Steve Reich and all those guys, but I'm starting to have doubts about ambient music because I think that AI is going to be making it soon and I won't be able to tell the difference.
Oh. Can you expound more on your worries, your concerns about AI, please?
Well, I mean, I read a lot of stuff about music, and quite often if I'm in a certain mode, then I'll read people who are talking about modern electronic or ambient music, and I think, oh, I'll give that a go. But the way AI is going, I think that AI might be able to produce that music without much effort, actually. Not that AI ever makes much of an effort. So I've become more suspicious of it. I think at least I know when people are singing and playing their saxophone and writing lyrics that AI isn't yet involved. But, you know, there's a lot of weird stuff going on Spotify where there are lots of fake bands that Spotify basically have made up so that they can keep the publishing. I don't know if I'm libeling anyone here, but that's what's going on, and it's going to be increasingly difficult to spot the difference between human music and machine music unless we pay attention.
What about writing?
Well, I feel that AI is a long way behind in terms of being able to capture someone's voice and to make jokes and to observe character. Maybe it will be able to do it eventually, but I don't think it will happen. Certainly not in my lifetime, and maybe not till my kids are old, let's say.
We have a question. You mentioned that you were talking about, being a book critic, and sometimes you're not the correct person to be reviewing a book. Do you have any favorite book critics? Are there people you think are doing it particularly well right now?
That's a very good question. I mean, I always liked Dwight Garner at the New York Times. And then other than that, it's people who switch between worlds. I guess Claire Dederer, who wrote the introduction to my books, I think she's a really good critic. Not just because she was nice in the introduction to that collection. Then she lost her mind temporarily. But when she reviews, I think she's so sharp.
Can I interrupt with another question, Beth? Because I
Yeah.
ask this, which is touching on this. I think the audience would love to hear too. What California writers are you drawn to, or what makes a California book? Do you ever find yourself when you listening to your body and wishing to sate your appetite for West Coast authors?
Well, yeah, I said in the questionnaire that Chandler was a very big person for me. I don't know if Susan Orlean counts as a Californian author because she lives here now, and she didn't always. But there's that, and then Joan Didion's nonfiction, some Dreamers of the Golden Dream, that kind of thing. That was really important to me when I was a young man learning to be a critic. But there's a lot, and just generally California is such an amazing place. And the first time I brought my kids here, they were kind of angry, I think, that people lived like this and we hadn't told them about it.
It's California, the best kept secret.
Yeah.
No one's ever heard of it. Yeah.
That's what Andrew Sean Greer said at our Licklick event. He said he got to San Francisco and he's like, no one told me this shit was going on over here.
It's true. I mean, the kids got off the plane, they're sort of squinting into the light in February, and then going for a swim, and they're like, these aren't even multi-billionaires. Some of them are just ordinary people, and they live like this.
That's very true. Well, on that note, on that beautiful California note, and while it is still halftime,
yes, thank you.
I would like to be cognizant of everyone's time, especially today. Big thank you to Nick Hornby for taking the time to speak to Alta Live today, and my wonderful boss.
Thank you for having me on.
Oh, an absolute delight and a thrill. Blaise, thank you so much for taking on this interview. Folks, thank you all for attending today. Join us next week. We're going to welcome Giant Robots Eric Nakamura, who will be in conversation with Matt Haber. Go buy Nick's new book, and we will see you next time. Take care, everyone.
We need another goal.
And we need another goal. Go Arsenal.
Go Arsenal.
Thank you.
Thanks all. Take care. Bye.
Bye.